we seem to be going up against football games, and there's a interesting one on tonight, at least if you're a fan of the Crimson Tide. We'll see. But at any rate, if anybody has to leave at 8:30 for the football game, that's okay. It's not the Patriots. I was just starting with some patter. We're not really starting yet. I was saying that there's the National Collegiate Championship football game is on at 8:30 tonight. If people feel compelled to go watch that, but it isn't the Patriots game tonight. I'm David Pollack. I'm the vice chair of Brookline School Committee and one of the three co-chairs of the ninth school at Baldwin Building Committee. The other two co-chairs are Nancy Daly from the Board of Selectmen to my right, and Janet Fearman, who's the chair of the town's Building Commission. And I just want to welcome you all tonight. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for coming to last Wednesday's other community meeting that was focused on traffic for the project. There are quite a few members of our building committee in the room tonight. John Doggett from the advisory committee has joined us up at the table. I see quite a David Gashik over here. I see lots of town and school staff over here in attendance. This is kind of a two-way kickoff for the project tonight, community kickoff for the project. We're going to start with a couple of presentations by the superintendent and by the architect, and then as quickly as possible we'll get to the listening part, which we're all here to listen to you for public comment. So I think that we've got a table of contents or an agenda here. The superintendent, Andrew Bott, is going to talk about why, a little bit of the background about why we're here in the first place, why we need a new elementary school. Then we're going to get an overview of the feasibility study. Then we'll get to public comment. There are sign-up sheets. We're going to kind of bring all of them up to the front and call on people one at a time. You can come up to any of the microphones or here. Keep it to 3 minutes so we're not here all night, and be respectful of all the other people who want to speak, and then we'll finish up with some next steps. So Superintendent Bott, with no further ado.
Is there a Wi-Fi connection we can use?
A Wi-Fi connection? Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
So I'm just going to walk everyone briefly through what many of us have heard many times over about the dramatic enrollment growth and the dramatic and ongoing enrollment growth in the public schools of Brookline. What you can see here is a graph that shows the enrollment from 1976-77 school year to the current school year in our K-12 enrollment. And you can see that if you look back to 07-08 is when the very steep and continuous enrollment growth started, taking us from the sort of 07-08 school year, around 6,000 students, to 7,400 this school year. It's the same. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. This was K-12. My apologies for that. This is our K-8 enrollment, and you can see the similar growth. Again, our K-8's going to just over 5,400 students in the current school year. Here's another way, a much easier way to see this, where you can see in 2005, our K-8 enrollment was just under 4,000 students. The 2015 school year, it was 5,466. And we expect by 2020 it will be in the range of 5,800 to 6,200. So continuing that growth, again speaking for the need for a ninth elementary school. Another way to look at this is what the growth has meant in terms of additional students. So the K-8 enrollment in from 05-06 to 10-11 saw a growth of 756 students. the equivalent of an additional school's worth of students over that time period, that 5-year time period. And then from the 2010-11 school year to the 2015-16 school year, a growth of another 814 students for a total of 1570. So the equivalent of 2 large elementary schools absorbed into the existing 8 K-8 schools within the public schools of Brookline. And so question has come up, what has Brookline been doing over this past decade to address the expanding enrollment? It started in 2009 with a facilities master plan created by MGT, and that was updated in 2011. 2013, the B-Space Committee was formed, including a feasibility study done by HMFH Architects, and that study resulted in a recommitment to expand in place strategy. Followed by continued study in 2014 by the Override Study Committee in the report, and that report included demographic projections that were done by a team from MIT. And then later that year, Civic Moxie was commissioned to identify possible locations for a 9th elementary school. I think what's really important for us in this process to remember is that our schools had intended sizes when they were designed, and they have their current sizes today. So for example, Baker School was intended to be 3 sections or 3 classes per grade, and is now 4.5 sections. It's 4 sections in all grades, and several of the grades are 5 sections. Devotion from a 4-section school to a 5-section school. Driscoll, Heath, Lincoln, and Runkle all growing from 2-section schools to 3-section schools. Lawrence from 3 to 4, and Pierce from 3, currently 4.5, and on a steady progression to 5 sections. So within that, 55 classrooms have been added through this expand in place strategy within the existing buildings, or with some smaller additions, 6 of those classrooms being built at Heath, the addition to the back of Heath, and 4 classrooms built through an addition at Lawrence, 2 modular classrooms that were added at Baker. We have 11 early childhood classrooms that are now out of our K-8 buildings and are in rental spaces. And we also have 4 additional classrooms for Pierce that are in rental spaces. So you can see that the growth, there's the addition of, again, 1,500 students, the equivalent of 2 of our schools, built into the existing infrastructure with some additional sort of overflow through both some of the expansions at Heath and Lawrence, and quite a bit of rental space at this point. So administrative offices have been relocated. All the administrative offices over the years that were housed, for example, here at Brookline High School, have been moved out. So Brookline High School will have 9 additional classrooms available for next year. That process of the moving out was just completed in December. Classroom spaces this winter and spring will be prepared for students for next year. Creating new classrooms by taking very large classrooms, making them smaller, converting hallways, converting locker rooms, converting small rooms, very often into substandard classroom spaces and administrative spaces. And using the buffer zone to help in this expansion process to manage enrollment numbers. So the buffer zone several years ago, all the buffer zones were expanded so that the enrollment, as the enrollment was growing, could be managed within this build-in-place strategy. And then reclaiming classrooms that were once dedicated to extended days. Before this dramatic enrollment growth started, many of the school's extended day programs had their own dedicated space. Those have all been lost to classroom space and are co-shared with school day and extended day. And then we are now spending approximately $1 million annually for rental space for the classrooms, mainly for classroom space, but for additional administrative office space. And just an example of what, when I say substandard space, I really want to give everybody here tonight a definition of what that means. We're using the MSBA, the Mass Building Authority guidelines, when classifying a space substandard. So it's less square footage than what the MSBA would recommend and what they would approve in their construction projects. So for example, our elementary and middle school classrooms that are classified as substandard are typically 100 to 300 square feet below the MSBA guidelines. And those classes, the guidelines range from 900 to 1,200 square feet depending on the age of students and the programming that space would be used for. We have special education classrooms. Learning center rooms are typically 25 to 30% below the MSBA guidelines for recommended use. Our cafeterias are undersized. They're typically, the cafeterias that are undersized are about 1,500 square feet below MSBA guidelines. That results in 2 of our schools already having lunches starting before 10:30 and scheduling 5 lunches over the course of the day because so much space has been reclaimed and captured within the existing buildings. Our gym spaces are about 2,000 square feet undersized pretty consistently across our schools based on the number of students who are enrolled. And classrooms and learning support areas have been created out of any space possible, including storage rooms and in a few cases storage rooms that don't have any windows. It's certainly a substandard space for students and for educators to work in. And the class size is continuing to grow. So in this, our class size has been going up. Currently, or last year, 2015-16, the average class size was 21, which is within the guidelines that Brookline has worked within for many, many years. A strong commitment to that class size and the educational effectiveness of that class size. Last year, there were 7 classes that had 25 students or more. What we project by 2020, 2021 is without an additional school, without a 9th school, the average class size will be 24, and there will be 75 classrooms within our K-8 schools that would have students, that would have an enrollment of 25 or more. And then the range right now is 17 to 27, and we anticipate that range would be 18 to 30. And so again, sort of repeating with a little more clarity what I was just saying, if we don't build a new 9th elementary school, we'll have a shortage of 27 to 30 classrooms across the district in our K-8 level. We'll continue to have undersized cafeterias, again with lunches starting before 10:30. And our core facilities will continue to be inadequate, such as our gymnasiums, our libraries, again our cafeterias, our auditorium spaces. And the expand in use is an expensive, we would have to expand the use of the expensive short-term solutions of modular and rentals. As you can see, the amount of money that we are spending for rental and for modulars, upwards of $1 million a year, is not money that we want to spend for the foreseeable, that any of us want to spend for the foreseeable future. And as I had just mentioned in the previous size, we will, without a new school, need to continue increasing class size. So with that overview of the need for a 9th elementary school, I'm going to turn over the rest of the presentation to our architect, Jonathan Levy.
Thank you, Andrew, for that extremely lucid description of the district's needs. My name's Jonathan Levy. I'm the consultant architect that the town has engaged with my firm, Jonathan Levy Architects, to follow up the site selection study that we have already completed with a feasibility study for the Baldwin site. Our charge is to conduct a study which helps us understand what the capacity of that site is, where buildings can be placed there, how those buildings interact with the open space and the various forms of transportation and pedestrian circulation on that site, and make a series of observations for the benefit of the deliberating body, which is the school building committee, who we report to. So we're marching to their orders, and that's the purpose of this study. So to give you a sense of where we are today, we're in the middle of the feasibility study. There are essentially 3 phases of tasks that we've undertaken for this study. The first is data collection and discovery, essentially getting into the nitty-gritty where we weren't able to in the site selection study of exactly what the physical characteristics of the site are, and also at the same time understanding its relationship to the neighborhood. At the same time, a very important part of what we're doing now is actually learning what the town needs. We know what they need numerically. Now we're learning what they need qualitatively in terms of the kinds of programs that are being envisioned for the 21st century and the decades to come that this new building will need to serve the town. And then finally is the design work that's done in response to and is in furthering the data collection and visioning that we've been doing over the past few months. And I'm here today to share the good news about the design work that we've accomplished to date and tell you a little bit about our observations of the site and the neighborhood and how this building would fit there. I always bring this slide at the beginning of every school presentation to remind us how important the work that we're doing is. The work on schools is work that pays back many times. It's by the children the thousands of children who will go there over the next 50 to 100 years. Some of the constraints that we consider in locating a building on a site, which are actually quite abundant at the Baldwin site. The first among these, by the way, this is a dual-purpose presentation. On the one hand, I'm introducing the entire town to some of our first work on this 9th elementary school project. On the other hand, it's directed to the neighborhood of the Baldwin school site to give you more insight into how we're with the direction of our school building committee, approaching the task of fitting a school sensitively into the overall context of the town and into that particular neighborhood. Daylighting is a primary concern. You may think that it's a very technical thing to be talking about in the siting of a new building, but it isn't. The orientation of a building in relationship to the sun is a key aspect in determining its overall shape and placement on the site. These are some examples of schools that we've done before that benefit. For example, this one here is the Wellington School done by my firm in Belmont, Mass. It's a typical classroom in that school is 100% daylit, which is a benefit not only to the town's operating budget, but also to the students who perform better in daylight than in artificial light. Also, our approach as a firm to fitting schools, which are often embedded in the midst of residential buildings, into their neighborhoods by sympathetic materials, choices of materials like brick and wood, but also by breaking down the overall form of the building so that it seems less like an institution and more like the housing that surrounds it. Again, the Wellington School in Belmont. And also, one of the great benefits of this site, huge benefit, is the abundance of natural beauty there, which we would see working together with our landscape architect as a primary goal in both siting the building and developing it. Also for educational use, because 21st century teachers are very interested in relating children to the out of doors, as not just for the beauty of it, but also as a specific location for classroom interactions, as here at the Field School, which we've recently completed in Weston, Mass. Community access is another important aspect having to do with how a building is oriented and how it's shaped, so that this is truly a community asset and as well as an educational asset. I think the entire school building community is coming to recognize that a school is a community development project as much as it is an educational project. So understanding how to compartmentalize the school so that it's readily available for the community to use, its athletic facilities, its meeting facilities, its cultural facilities, and it can be secured in a way that doesn't conflict with the rest of the school's operations. And this is a diagram showing you how that was done at one of our recent schools by creating a core area which was easily segregated from the academic areas of the school. And then something that we're not going to have time to get into today, but I hope those of you, and I thank all of you for your interest tonight, who are really interested in the depth of our work and collaborating with us as we move forward into the detail of a possible project. But I want to alert you to the fact that a school isn't what it used to be. It's a very different place because our children are quite different than the ones that we educated 10 or 20 years ago. They require places for collaboration. They require places for doing project-based learning. They need places where they can drive education as much as their teachers and administrators do. So this is some examples of project-based learning space, collaborative learning space that have been developed at other schools where the students are literally precipitating out of the digital world and into the physical world with one another around project-based learning. And these are some examples from around the world where classrooms are starting to give way. Not that our project will be that radical in form, where classrooms are starting to give way to schools that are largely made up of collaborative learning space. This is the diagram that we've worked out together with Superintendent Bott and his staff. We've met very vigorously with the superintendent and with each of the principals of the current K through 8 schools throughout the system, trying to envision how to make this school relevant not just to today, but also to tomorrow. And the kind of school that we're envisioning is one that's comprised of 3 cohorts, rather than the 2 cohorts that we typically think of when we think of a K to 8 school today. Typically we now think of a lower school and a middle school. The superintendent has put forward a new vision for 3 cohorts with an intermediate group of grades 3 through 5 that would consist of their own learning community. That's primarily what you're seeing here. Also what you're seeing is the aggregation of formerly distinct areas like libraries, cafeterias, and auditoria into a major what's called learning commons, where these components can interact flexibly with one another. So those are some of the issues that are in the background as we start to think of the building and how to locate it onto the site. But I do want to talk about the site. It's a very impressive and important site. Just by happy coincidence, I also happen to be a person that lives here in the town and has for the last 40 years. For many years I lived on Green Hill on Fairmount Street, and currently I live on the top of Aspinwall Hill behind Washington Square for many, many years. I remember back in the early 90s taking my kids to the Baldwin School playground and have enjoyed the beauty of that site and its magnificent trees, and also all the open space, and what an amazing possibility to create a symbiosis between the Sewell playground and recreational facilities and a new school. What a privileged child that will be to be able to have access to that wonderful open space. So this is a map or a Google image of the site. There's Heath Street at the top of the page, Hammond Street to the left. At the bottom here is the Sewell recreational area, including the artificial turf field, the parking lot, the recreation building, which my firm also by coincidence happened to have renovated. We studied this site 15 years ago. We renovated that, as some of you will remember, the raft teenage facility that was there, and also, of course, the early childhood function that's there now. We did that renovation. I'll show you a picture of it in a moment. And also the open space where my kids have played soccer over these many years. And then the underutilized knoll at the top of this ledge, which was the site of the former estate, which serves as an informal parking area today. And then to the top of the page is the Baldwin School site proper, including the old the Baldwin School building, which is now currently used for early education and by certain high school programs. And then off to the side here, a little parcel of recreational land that was set aside as tennis courts, and then the wonderful open space. So the main attribute of the site that I want to bring your attention to is the sunlight. It's wonderfully oriented directly to the south. This is the path of the sun. This is the Baldwin School. Here's Heath Street. Here's Hammond. We know about the traffic congestion, and that certainly is a very important area of study for our feasibility work. But also this wonderful canopy of trees, which we've chosen to make kind of the fulcrum around which our proposals for possible building solutions might revolve. The surrounding area is an interesting one. It's a transitional area in the sense of its zoning. It goes from a very large multifamily residential buildings. This is one on Hammond Street. This is one immediately adjacent to the property. To smaller multifamily residences along Heath Street. It has commercial directly across the street, and then it transitions into larger single-family homes on larger lots. So it's really quite a mix of different kinds of property that we're in the middle of. On the Sewell site itself is the recreation center. Here's the canopy and waiting bench that I created 15 years ago. There's also the recreation department has been making do over the years with some sort of borrowed buildings. This is a temporary structure which is used as a classroom, which we hope to replace and incorporate as part of the benefit that this project will bring to the parks and recreation, and also the old cinder block gymnasium. There's a small gymnasium there that really needs to be replaced, and we hope to be able to accomplish that as part of the project. The site itself, here's an old plan from the Olmsted brothers showing the landscaping of the old Wright estate with the open space which is being used now for soccer field. There's the space, and then the informal parking lot. And then finally, the most important thing to me as an architect, having visited this site, and the thing that has inspired me and made me feel passionate about it, is these wonderful great oaks. Which we've had an arborist survey. There are oaks that are very healthy and will be there for many years to come, and we hope to wrap our building around them and utilize them as an asset for the children. And this is the very specific aspect of the site that we're starting to engage and relate to, which is the fact that it's a valley with two hills, one to the north and one to the south. And in between the valley, in the middle of the valley, are the planted trees, which actually form a line. They were planted there and probably give their name to Oak Street, which is next door to them. A very interesting line of trees, sort of a hybrid between artifice and nature at the center of the site. So at this point where we are is having begun to study options for this site. We're just touching the surface of those options today. We've met with an initial presentation with the school building committee a couple of weeks ago. We're about to meet with them again tomorrow. There are 5 options which we're studying. These options are meant to sort of shake out all the possibilities for both the site and for the program, keeping in mind the division into 3 cohorts that I mentioned to you earlier, and also the idea for collaboration space as a central part of the school, something a little unlike anything that we have at our current K-8 schools. Option A is a kind of a serpentine scheme. Option B is a dual courtyard scheme with an open court and a winter garden. Option C, we just wanted to test what would happen if we didn't orient the wings of the classroom properly to the sunlight, but these converging wings have great advantages in terms of bringing all the school together at the center of the site. Option D, which is really about harvesting sunlight, perfectly oriented to the sun, with its 2 major and minor learning commons, one for the older kids and one for the younger kids. And then option E, which is sort of a hybrid between D and A. So how do we go from here? So the school building committee is going to be deliberating as we also, and providing input. Likely there'll be a hybrid of several of the approaches. As you know, we have a traffic study which is imminent. which will be part of the decision-making matrix. This is what's called an evaluation matrix. It's just a simple way of bringing together various observations about according to a certain set of criteria. So here on the left are the criteria, not criterion, Philip, criteria. And on the right are the three options, A, B, and C, that we hope to winnow down to perhaps tomorrow. And then along the criterion evaluation, we see different evaluations from advantageous to very disadvantageous, with neutral being white in the middle. So how do you make an evaluation matrix like this? You do it by deliberating and by conversing and by having a good, healthy conversation among the members of the building committee with community input, which is actually a very good segue to the next part of the evening.
This isn't done.
No, this is not done. This is just a sample to give you a sense. Thank you, David, for, yes, this isn't done. So this is what's going to be evolving as we meet next with the school building committee. And they'll be deliberating whether these are the right criteria or the wrong criteria, or whether more are needed. And then they'll finally be deliberating with our advice and input, and hopefully yours as well, how advantageous or disadvantageous each of these schemes is. So that completes my portion of the presentation. And Ben, did you want to take it from here? Or?
Yeah, I think we have your sign-up sheets. Let's start calling on people. And, are there
Okay, so I have been asked to simply be the person that calls people up to the rostrum.
Okay, are there microphones on
There are two
either
microphones,
side?
one on either side. We have a sign-up list here. It is possible that you will have specific factual questions that I feel qualified to answer. In that case, I will try to do so briefly, but the main purpose of this evening is to hear from you. So the first person, yes, Nancy.
We're going to ask you all to limit yourself to 3 minutes so everyone gets a chance. Sorry, is my microphone on? Okay, we're asking you to limit yourself to 3 minutes. And I will hold up a card saying 1 minute when that's all you have left, and time when you're done. So just to be respectful of everyone who wants to speak, try to stick with the 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So with that, we welcome your input. Bob Macdonald. And then after that, if Mike, is it Malone or Manauv and Ala Sadeghi could come up, Ab Sadeghi could come up as well, so that they're ready to speak. Thank you.
Good evening.
Bob.
Thank you
Yes.
for inviting us to this. Is this mic on? Okay. I'll try to keep my face as close to it as I can. I'm not used to a Mick Jagger style, but I'll try. My name is Bob Macdonald. I'm an attorney. I represent people who live in the neighborhood, and I am also working with other attorneys who represent additional people who work in the neighborhood. My partner, Dan Goldberg, spoke at the public meeting that we had Wednesday night. We appreciate the opportunity that we had there. I want to emphasize that this is a feasibility study, as we pointed out in our letter to you on Friday, January 6th. It's a fact inquiry, and it needs to be open and it needs to be transparent. And we really appreciate the commitment that Co-Chair Pollack made at the meeting on Wednesday night, that if this feasibility study results in findings that will show this school doesn't fit at this site, this school generates traffic that will be unsafe and dangerous to the children and to the neighborhood, this school creates other problems, that there will be an adult objective decision to not put the school there and to choose another site. We are very concerned that there are many carts before the horse. I know that you've done a huge amount of work so far, but a comprehensive traffic study was not done in the course of the site selection process. It really needs to be done. We are not against a ninth school. We recognize that the town needs a ninth school, and we recognize that it is a very difficult process, and that you people in particular and people on other boards are in a difficult situation. But we are against a ninth school that will be put in an unsafe location. There have already been traffic findings that the traffic at this site is unworkable. We have retained a traffic expert from VHB, as we made you aware the other night. We urgently request that the data that is being collected be given to our expert before your expert makes his report, because there needs to be a joint objective process in which the two sides or the many sides can question each other. And we need the data. We need the data to make our own evaluations and to present our insights to you, our insights which are based on living in the neighborhood, but also insights that will be based on that data. We additionally, we urge you to do the redistricting before you do the site selection, because we need to know where people are coming from.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you
Bob.
very much.
Mike?
I'm Michael Manov. I'd like to face the audience. I don't know if I can. Hi, everybody. I was initially in favor. Well, I've been following this for a lot of the 2 years that Brookline has been debating where to put this school. I was initially in favor of Baker, but tonight's presentation showed me that there really is a lot of space for a very nice school at the Baldwin site. We've debated this for 2 years. The Baldwin site was chosen. I think I can see that it's a reasonable place. I like lawyers, and I'm glad there are lawyers here, but if for any reason we go backwards instead of forwards, we're going to have a lot more lawyers, that I know. And it'll be a mess. The school will be further delayed, and we'll be getting into some of these 10:30 lunches that people have been talking about. I think that the architects have made good progress, and I only hope we can go forward and not suffer from too much not in my backyard mentality. It has to go somewhere, and the Baldwin site seems like a reasonable place to put the school. Thank you.
Yes, Av, and then Stephen Wall, Bob Miller, and Jack Films, please, if you could come up and be ready to speak.
I'm Ab Sadeghi. My wife Marion and I have been living at the Arlington Road for I'm Ab Sadeghi. We have been living on 125 Arlington Road for the past 40 years. I have been a town meeting member from Precinct 15 for 25 years and served on the advisory committee for 6. Our 2 children went to Baker and to Brookline High School. I think in Brookline we're fortunate to have a large number of civic-minded citizens who participate in town affairs. I'm specifically grateful to the Board of Selectmen and the school committee members who freely gave up their free time to work up on town affairs. and specifically on the ninth school. They worked for many years, and after at least 1 year of many meetings and hard work by staff and consultants, decided to choose Baldwin School as their site. We may agree or disagree with that decision, but I don't think that their personal sacrifices and their motives can be questioned. I was disappointed in the meeting of last week, primarily directed at the traffic issues. I found many of the speakers' comments inappropriate and combative. I also thought that the committee responses were often non-existent, paternalistic, or dismissive. I think that the school committee has persuaded most of us that we need a ninth school. And because of our isolation in South Brookline, many of us would like to have the school in South Brookline. At this point, I'm not either for or against the Baldwin School. I think that we need site-specific studies, particularly related to traffic, to clear the air. The town has created traffic or called for traffic consultants. And the neighbors also have hired private traffic consultants. I urge these two groups to work together and provide reports that at least at the data they start at the same point, even if the results are different.
Thank you. Stephen?
Hi, my name is Stephen Wald. I'm a lawyer. My name is Stephen Wald. I also am a lawyer. I represent neighbors of Baldwin, and mostly I just have some questions tonight. Hello? Okay. My name is Stephen Wald. I also am a lawyer. I represent neighbors of Baldwin, and I mostly just have a few questions tonight. First, for Mr. Levy, you said at the last meeting last week that there's not going to be a parking garage. There was some talk, at least in some of your plans, that reflected that there was going to be. When was that decided? That there wouldn't be a parking garage?
We were asked to make our best proposals for alternatives for the site, and we are not proposing a parking garage as part of the deliberations that the school building committee is making now.
Was it ever on the drawing board, a parking garage?
It was never on the drawing board, no. Okay. Somebody had mentioned that they thought a parking garage might be appropriate, but we never studied that.
Okay. I think the confusion might be there was a parking garage proposed if we went with the Baker site.
Okay. Second is, in October, there was discussion for the Baldwin site of there being two ways to enter the site, one from Woodland Road through the Sewell property and one through Heath Street. Are both those entranceways still under consideration?
We're only considering currently, and we've tasked the traffic engineer with studying the existing curb cut onto Heath Street as the access point for the parking area.
Okay.
It may be that further mitigation is suggested later as a result of the traffic study, but currently we've asked him to study the existing curb cut.
Okay. So, and then last week, as you know, a lot of people came with comments about what should be studied in addition to what they understood Mr. Hams and his firm were working on. And in addition, Mr. Bond from VHB, who we have retained to do work, had his own comments, and I forwarded to the co-chairs this afternoon his proposals for how the scope of work should be expanded. Is the scope of work that Mr. Ham's firm is doing, is that going to be expanded to reflect Mr. Bond's comments and the comments of the attendees last week?
We're going to have to see what money we've got to expand it, and it may be. There's certainly some more, I think, that we need to study. It may be through our traffic department instead of through this study. We'll have to see.
So the professional traffic consultant that you've retained is not going to do the evaluation that you solicited the neighbors to come in and talk about?
Some of the issues were farther afield than right near the school. We're quite a bit farther afield.
We received the letter from Mr. Bond, and it is a very extensive list of suggestions that he thinks should be included in the traffic study. I spoke with Mr. Masick, our project manager from the building department today, and he indicated that that he was already working, talking to the architects, and was going to try to schedule a meeting where the two traffic consultants could sit down together and talk about the list of proposed additional studies. And he also, Mr. Masick indicated to me that he also was going to sit down, I don't know if it's with the traffic consultant, but he was going to sit down with our town's traffic department, who had considerable input into the shaping of the initial brief that was reviewed. That wasn't just invented by the traffic consultant. It was actually put together in consultation with the town's traffic department. And so the requested additions would be reviewed with the traffic department as well. So the letter was received, the suggestions were well received in the sense of having more interested people participating. And I think, personally, I think that having the two traffic consultants sit down together and come up with a rational sense of what really needs to be studied will be a good thing. Funds are, of course, limited. Time is limited. And we also want to get the professional input of the town's traffic engineers.
Well, we welcome that. Just so the audience understands.
Could we have VAC?
The scope of work was dated.
Can we have VAC films, please? And then Robin?
So the audience understands, the scope of work for the traffic study done by the town was dated.
Is Bob Miller here?
January 3rd.
Bob, come up, please. VAC films. I'm sorry.
Let me
You're out
just
of
say
order.
so the audience understands. The scope of work for the
Sorry, there are
town's
actual
traffic
citizens who
engineer.
would like to speak now.
The scope of work for the town's traffic engineer was dated January 3rd, the day before the hearing. So it was timely for the input of the town's neighbors that came.
Hi, Bob.
My name's Bob Miller. I'm a Brookline homeowner, and my children both were devotion students and then Brookline High students. I'm also a teacher at the Heath School, but I only switched to being a teacher when my children were just about done with devotion. So I was first a parent in the system. And I have to say that throughout the process, I have not been a particularly ardent proponent or opponent of any of the particular sites. And I do have to say that the Baldwin site is a site with flaws. But I also have to say that there has not been a site proposed, nor do I think there could be a site proposed that's without flaws, including, a number of people are mentioning traffic, and I know that living in North Brookline, the devotion school certainly is in an area with heavy traffic, which is where my children went to school. If we're looking for a site that comes without flaws, I think we can pretty much stop looking and start trying to figure out another way to go, because I don't think they exist. What I can tell you as a teacher is that the consequences of overcrowding are already being felt in numerous ways in the schools of Brookline, and this is going to get worse before it gets better. At some point, we have to move forward with a site for the ninth school, and I fear that to start the process again is to risk adding months and years without landing up back here again with the same issues for wherever we pick. And what I can tell you is that among those things that are being felt already in the schools are growing class sizes, classes being held in rooms that were never meant to be classrooms. In some cases, there have been classes held in hallways, larger classes, and I'm sure that as the needs grow, which they will continue to grow, that the solutions that are being implemented in the absence of a new school are going to get worse and worse. So I would urge people that even if you don't like the location, please consider the impact that saying no would have. And I would just say no to just saying no.
Okay, Zach. And then if Robin and Adrian could be ready to speak.
My name is Jaak Wilms, and I live on 629 Hammond Street, which is a building on the corner of Hammond and Heath. And I've been there for 6 years now. Several comments. Point one, elementary school students deserve a walk-in school. If you put a big school there with buses, you are depriving elementary school students in various areas of Brookline from the opportunity for walking to school. So that's mistake number one in having the big school there. The second comment, it's a beautiful site and it's very nice for a school. The pictures are beautiful, it looks great, it's wonderful. Put the small school there and put administrative offices there so the superintendent and everybody can have their meetings there, and then they can eat lunch in all the new restaurants in Chestnut Hill. Then take the garbage truck maintenance area that's down the street on Hammond. Put a medium-sized school there, and the buses can get in and out very nicely there. There's no conflict with any congestion and historic streets like Heath Street. And then transfer the maintenance area into the site of the transfer station on Skyline Drive. And that would remove these huge big garbage trucks going up and down Hammond Street, and that would be a dandy solution. So the maintenance facility that's right now next to Potterham Golf Course, which hole is there? I don't know which golf tee there. Move that to the transfer station. Get rid of that awful transfer station there, and then put the bigger school right there where those garbage trucks, the red trucks, are now, and put a nice, small, slightly enlarged Baldwin school together with administrative offices and conference rooms, so that would meet the needs of the school district and meet the needs of those who are really pushing for that site. Thank you.
Robin, please. Robin Pfeffer. And then Adrian Bowen.
Thank you. My name is Reuben Pfeffer. I live on Hammond Street in the Carriage House, actually. I received the notice of the public meeting, which I appreciate, and I'm very disappointed that the presentation this evening reiterated what we all agree on, which is a new school for Brookline. That's not an issue that anyone has a problem with. Yet there were a number of points listed here that I would have expected the dais up front to address proactively. So I think that these points should be addressed by the esteemed committee up front. The redistricting plan and its impact on students across Brookline. The cost to taxpayers of building new elementary school and new high school, great, do it, but you have it here with no state reimbursement. I think that should be proactively addressed by you. Walkability and pedestrian safety, just because we had a 2.5-hour meeting last week where citizens from all over the area, and I'm not just saying the citizens that border on the Baldwin area, address some very, very specific and concerning problems. Conservation and preservation issues, yes, You did address it tonight, but I would say not very satisfactorily, because you were pointing to the positives of the area and its preservation value. Yet we're talking about a school that will largely hamper the preservation value. And then the demolition of existing historic structures. I don't think that was addressed. You did point out that you may be taking down the concrete gymnasium. No one would have any problem with that. But we do have history there. We do have a beautiful land lease. I could go over some of the points that I raised last week, just like you went over points that you raised last week. I have a real problem with the walkability. I have a problem seeing Pine Manor students, college students, walking in very compromised ways along Heath Street. I can only imagine it being that much more dangerous for young children, mothers with strollers, and so on. I live where I can see the soccer games in the artificial turf field, and I know what it's like seeing the parking there that becomes overcrowded. And I've heard from police officers from time to time by cars that park illegally in front of my house, which is a no parking side of the street with no sidewalk, that it must be kept clear because of emergency access. And it is not kept clear even with soccer games. I can't imagine what it would be like with 800 students. So I ask you, next time we have a meeting, if you've identified issues that need to be raised, why put it here for us to ask you the questions? Why not proactively make a presentation that clearly stipulates how you are addressing these points? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Adrian, and then Wendy Murphy and Peter Vickers.
Hi, my name is Adrian Bowman. I'm a Precinct 16 town meeting member. And I just wanted to say that everybody can understand that the abutters are upset. People in the neighborhood are upset. However, regardless of where the school was placed, it would change the fabric of that neighborhood. I urge everyone to think about the myriad positive ways that it would impact the area. The previous speaker talked about sidewalks. I feel like this would be a great opportunity to say, okay, we actually need sidewalks in this neighborhood. Nobody in Brookline is going to say, well, put a school here without sidewalks. That's absurd. No one understands the area as well as the people who live there, and I urge those people to help JLA and the building committees think about the ways to improve the work that is already being done rather than shut it down carte blanche. This impacts the entire town and the quality of education of all the schools. We do not have the luxury of dreaming up a perfect site. We have to trust the decisions of our elected officials and do what is best for the whole town. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wendy, and I live in Brookline. I'd like to begin tonight by reading to you a few comments made by various members of the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the building committee in regards to the feasibility of the Baldwin site. This is a challenge for Baldwin walkability, and it makes it the least desirable site. Mr. Glover, October 13th, 2016 school committee meeting. As the B-space analysis also concluded, there are very few students living nearby, so this would not be a neighborhood school, and the redistricting needed to fill it might distort other elementary school attendance boundaries. Ms. Stone, October, school committee meeting. Agreed that significant fewer children live near Baldwin, and that is a concern. Mr. Pollack in October. We want to maintain a commitment to neighborhood K-8 schools. Ms. Strand. Building in North Brookline needs to be the first step because that is where this need is most urgently felt. More children may need to be bused. Ms. Daly, October. Traffic issues are different at the sites and none of them will go away. Ms. Scotto. The drawback is the relatively small number of children living nearby. We would have to endure the cost of busing students for years, Ms. Scotto. It is clear that the community wants neighborhood K-8 schools. That is Brookline. Ms. Ditkoff. She, Ms. Ditkoff, is worried about the affordability, given the need for 2 debt exclusions for the 9th school and the high school, and an operating budget override to open the building. Fewer children will be able to walk to the school, but we don't know the district-wide impact on busing because redistricting will include multiple factors, including income status of students and the effect on the boundaries of neighboring schools. Ms. Ditkoff, also in October. Ms. Scotto stated that she is concerned that Baldwin would not be a walkable school. Not many children live in the neighborhood. Many children would be driven to school or bused, and this would exacerbate the traffic problems. We will be paying for increased busing well into the future. Ms. Scotto also. The decision should not be based on what is the best site, not on what can be sold to the voters. The need is in North Brookline, and this would not solve the North Brookline problem. Ms. Stone. He, Mr. Pollack, is not comfortable envisioning building for 800 students at Baldwin. B-Space concluded that Baldwin was a bad spot for a new school. Very few kids live nearby, so it would require a lot of redistricting and busing. Baldwin was not part of the Civic Moxie analysis. No one has explained why things are different now. How many kids could walk and how many would be bused? We need to see the data before making a decision. A member of the building committee, September at the school committee meeting. I encourage you all. Somebody has given me their additional 3 minutes because what I want to be able to say.
Can we hear from Peter, please? Peter Vickers.
This is really important.
Peter Vickers. The only reason I'm trying to enforce these rules is so that everyone can have a chance to speak. Peter Vickers, Susan Grant after that, and Janice Cohn.
I think Wendy put it all in a nutshell. They've made a decision, and we're not part of it. Guys, I pointed out at the last meeting that a traffic study was done by these gentlemen, and it showed that this site was not feasible. I listened to the presentation put together by Andrew, where he talked about an increase of 1,570 students. We're talking about a school for 800 here. We're not dealing with the problem in the schools. Those overcrowded classrooms will still be there. We need some guidance from these people as to what the solution can be, rather than deals made in back rooms. Thank you.
Susan, please, and then Janice Cohn.
Okay. Hello, I'm Susan Granoff. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 7. I really have been listening very carefully to the concerns being expressed here. I've been very involved for the past year in the whole process that went into the final vote that took place last October. And I'd like to make some observations. First, all 3 finalist sites under consideration have significant drawbacks, and there were negative comments made about all of them. In the year leading up to the October 13th vote, the selectmen and school committee members studied the pros and cons of each site, hired architects to prepare a detailed report on each site, attended numerous public meetings to hear oral public comments from Brookline residents, and read thousands of written emails, letters, statements, and petitions from concerned Brookline residents. The selectmen and school committee members followed a democratic public process in which everyone had a chance to participate if they so chose. People opposing specific sites had many opportunities to make their case, and they did, both in writing and orally, prior to the October vote. No new information, or at least substantially new information, about the Baldwin site has come to light since the October vote that the selectmen and school committee members took. And nothing has been brought to anyone's attention as of today that these decision makers didn't know about and consider at the time of their October vote. Fourth, because of the urgent need for a ninth school, additional delays caused by reconsidering the October vote at this time would be detrimental to the town and its school children. Finally, this is the time now to focus on how we can construct the best possible school on the Baldwin site, taking into account the needs and preferences of all of the residents in that area and the needs of our school children. This is an opportunity, and I would hate to see that we lose that by focusing on what happened 3 months ago. Now is the time to focus on things that we can still make a difference about. Thank you.
Okay, can we hear from Janice? And then Neil Gordon and I believe it's Mark Gray should be ready to speak. Janice.
Yes, Janice Kahn, town meeting member from Precinct 15. Just to follow up on something Susan said, one thing that we do know is that JLA did a comparative matrix of which our consultant labeled it as very disadvantageous. So the decision to choose Baldwin was certainly not based on consultant input, just to clarify. I have one thing to add to the discussion that I don't think I've heard yet, which is that when you start putting together the matrix, the more in-depth matrix that you're going to look at, that you also include looking at a carbon footprint. That as a town, we have made a lot of efforts to green our town, to pass legislation, to make people very aware of the importance of caring for our environment and having the least environmental impact that we possibly can. And what we're seeing here, everything looks good on paper. Everything out of context looks good, looks doable. I thought it looked very good. And that's true of any drawing on a piece of paper out of context. But the reality is this is a 90% commuter school, that it will diminish the amount of green space, that it will tear down existing buildings, all of which have negative impacts on the carbon footprint that we put in this town. And I know in talking to members of the Green Caucus before a decision was made, everyone that I talked to talked about building it in a place that did not diminish green space, that really took a very progressive view of the environment in Brookline. This is a town we love, partly because of the green space that we have been able to preserve in a town that is close to an urban area, and yet we still maintain some sense of greenness. And I really urge that when we look at this site, that we really look at it with an eye to the carbon footprint and our responsibility to future generations. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I'm Neil Gordon. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member. Let me just say, on Facebook, in this room, and otherwise, please don't accuse our school committee or board of selectmen or other public officials of backroom deals. If you have evidence of that, bring it forth. It's a violation of the law. It's not a casual debate comment. My comments, to the extent I'm redundant, I'm going to do it quickly. Brookline's problem is very simple. Our founders 400 years ago didn't leave us with a 400-year plan. Our open land and our roads are simply in the wrong place. We're not going to wish that away. We work with what we have. No site has been identified through extensive study at any point in this process that is, by overall objective measure, better than Baldwin. You can subjectively evaluate and weight factors, and we'll reach different conclusions. This was a subjective decision. It's a call that's been made. We need to move forward. There's also a small silent minority in Brookline. They're already quietly asking, where will I go to school? Where are the lawyers representing them?
Mark? My name is Mark Gray, and I'm a town meeting member. I grew up in Brookline, attended the Brookline schools K through 12, and graduated from Brookline High School. Like most of you, I'm concerned about the increase in school enrollment and the resulting need for additional classrooms. The children of Brookline need additional classrooms to avoid overcrowded classes. I'm pleased the selectmen and the school committee decided to build such a much-needed ninth school after conducting an open community process. I'm familiar with this process because I attended most of the school committee, selectmen, and community meetings that informed residents about the issue. At these meetings, the conveners also solicited questions and comments from the community. As Brookline school enrollment continues to grow, it is time for us, the community, to support our children and create a timeline for the necessary steps to build the 9th elementary school.
Yes, can we please have Deb Abner, Lauren Mastretta, and Harry Bors?
My name is Deb Abner. I'm a resident of 265 Road. My 4 children graduated from Baker 150 children ago. I am here actually as a school librarian at the Lincoln School. I was a little worried that people were not understanding how crowded our schools were. Education has always been a primary value in Brookline. I think we all can agree. Passions are very high this evening. But if we're going to maintain our excellence, we have to build a new school. I can tell you at Lincoln School, we have 3 sections in a 2-section school. We have classes of 24 and 25 children. We have people in closets. And I am sharing the library with 2 math specialists, which means dueling classrooms. I feel like classroom teachers are working really hard. Everyone is trying to do the best, but we need to have the 9th school. I understand my neighbors in Precinct 15. I understand about the traffic issues. I know that traffic has increased everywhere in Brookline. My 3-mile commute takes me double the time it used to take 2 years ago. I also disagree with people who said it was not an open process. If you read the Tab or the Boston Globe, they have had notifications of meetings about this process that has been going on for at least a year. Like many in this room, I have gone to all of the meetings. And I know that it was a very difficult decision for all of the people who had a vote. And even though the Baldwin School may not be the best because of traffic, there was no other solution. The other alternative was the Baker School, which would also decrease the green space even more. And also the danger of doing construction while you have an 800 school on site. I can't even imagine that, and the traffic issues. And then, of course, there was the Stop and Shop. I feel like people have tried to do their best to come up with a good compromise, and we have to focus on getting the best school we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. Can we hear from Lauren now? Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Lauren Mastretta. I grew up in Brookline. I live in South Brookline. I grew up in North Brookline. I want to start by thanking the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee for your leadership through this incredibly arduous, long process. I would ask all of the members of our town to rise to the occasion, to be your best self and engage with your fellow community members and have civil discussion so we can be role models for our children and teach them how they should engage to solve problems instead of heckling the leadership. These people are volunteers. They volunteer hours and hours of their lives away to help us. So I'm asking for all of us to demonstrate those behaviors for our children. Brookline Public Schools are ranked among the top in the state and the country. Conditions of overcrowding and substandard classroom space that Andrew Bott described earlier are not hallmarks of the school system we're known for, that our children deserve, and continue to contribute to the increase in all of our property values. It's time for us to come together as a community after a difficult, long, and arduous process with much public interest and involvement, and we need to support a ninth school and work together to ensure that we make it the best for our children and our town and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Harry, and then Julie Gross and Arthur Brownstein.
Good evening, Harry Bors. I live over in Precinct 3, over by the Lawrence School. I don't live right by Baldwin. I'm not going to offer that I think this is the perfect site because I don't think there is such thing as a perfect site. And I'm not going to pretend that I know all of the nuance of this neighborhood because I think only the neighbors do. But I'd like to just offer my experience a little bit being around the Lawrence School because it may be helpful in this case. I live in direct sight of the Lawrence School. It was small when we got there. It got a quite large addition a number of years ago and then another addition after that. And at first it is sort of striking because nobody likes change. More importantly though, we are a very tight neighborhood. I mean a physically tight neighborhood with narrow streets, cramped corners, and a large school with a lot of kids and a lot of activity going on in the morning and when school lets out. Which gets to the traffic issue. And I'm sure that a traffic engineer would look and say, at Lawrence School now, well, this is just an impossibility. And I will tell you, every morning I have to deal with it. So I swing around the corner, and I look at what at first blanch looks like a squalor of humanity. School buses, cars, children's, dogs. I will tell you, I'm surprised I haven't gotten ocular damage from the number of times I've rolled my eyes into the back of my head. I'm sure when I get to the pearly gates, I will not be the express lane. It will be the long line because of all my blasphemous utterings as I try and work my way through clenching the steering wheel for what seems like eternity. That's the perception, but here's the reality. I don't change the way I go because in fact it has never held me up for more than 2 or 3 minutes. That's just the reality. Reality doesn't quite meet sort of the most fearful expectations. And the other thing is, it really is only about a 20-minute window in the morning and in the afternoon. In fact, if I leave 10 minutes earlier, I miss it completely. If I leave 10 minutes later, I miss it completely. And it's really a half-year problem because school's basically 180 days a year. So when you listen to the analysis of traffic, and I understand it is an issue, I deal with it every day, I hope this helps put it in a little bit of perspective. And as I said, in our experience, the reality has not matched our fearful expectations. Having said that, I think a school in a neighborhood is a great asset in a lot of ways that you don't even realize until you have it. I think there's no reason that we can't make this a gem of a school, but it means everybody working together, collaborating, focusing on doing it. We have spent years discussing this, analyzing this, having meetings, having hearings, people being able to speak, some people over and over and over again. And at a certain point, we have to stop looking in the rearview mirror at everything we've gone through and focus and move forward and do it collaboratively and come up with something that's good for the neighborhood, that's good for the school system, and is good for the Brookline community as a whole because it is a community asset.
Thank you, Harry. We'd like to have Julie Gross, Arthur Brownstein, and then Rachel Oberoi-Soaps. I apologize for mispronouncing.
Hi, I'm Julie Gross. I'm at 629 Hammond Street, which is the corner of Heath and Hammond. And I'm not against having an additional school in Brookline, but I'm very concerned with having a school at a location that has been deemed level F for traffic. I have a couple of questions, and it'd be great if they could be answered tonight instead of putting them on a list for later. I'll just rattle them off. One is, has there been any thought to any coordination with the 1180 Boylston project that is being proposed? That's, you know, the 45 units that's going to add another 150 people plus coming and going, valet parking. So I'm just wondering if any of the traffic studies or any of the proposed work is being coordinated together with the school. Maybe I'll ask all my questions so that I don't get ripped off. The next one is, what about the coordinating of kids going to Beaver Country Day? So the buses, the people driving, there's going to be two schools right across from each other. How is that going to work? There's already a policeman out there. And the third one somebody mentioned before, why are we not going for state funding? Is it because it's going to slow the process down? And if it is, maybe that could help us find a better solution to this problem.
All right, I'll take the first two. They're actually the same question, which is, are we taking into account not only current load on traffic, but also future loads that might be imposed by new development? The answer is yes. So the traffic consultant you'll see in the report when it comes out is not only taking into account what we know today is present in terms of congestion, but also what will be created by future development.
I don't want to take up too much time about the go it alone decision, but it's been asked twice, so I think it's worth a minute.
I'm Mike Sandman. I'm on the advisory committee, which, for those of you who don't know, is the Town Finance Committee, and I'm the chair of the subcommittee that considers the school budget. I think something that is very important to recognize is that the Massachusetts School Building Authority doesn't give out money because you ask. It gives out money because, in their view, a town needs the funds, and we were informed when we applied for funding for expansion of the high school that the focus of funding for MSBA was going to be on towns whose buildings were deteriorating to the point where there was a safety issue. So apparently the best way to get MSBA funding now is to stop maintaining our buildings, wait 10 years or 20 until they begin to fall apart. That, of course, is a facetious comment, but it was made very clear to Brookline that it was very unlikely that we would get funding for either the high school or for a 9th elementary school. The question was whether we should wait and make another application, and it was the very carefully considered advice of the finance committee of the town that it was a mistake to do that. Costs rise. There are requirements that MSBA imposes that we did not necessarily want to have imposed on us. There were limitations that are imposed on the design by MSBA that we did not necessarily want to have imposed. And on top of that, it didn't look like we'd get the money anyway. Thus, we are indeed going it alone.
Hello, I'm Rachel O'Bryce-Soltz, and I'm a resident of Brookline. I live in the Coolidge Corner area, and there are no infinite choices before us. There are basically 3 choices, and they were as a result of the triage. During the day, I manage MIT's relations with industry, and so things pretty much are based on facts and events. And so when I look at where the schools are right now, the elementary schools, if we look at the Pierce School as a central point, then Driscoll is 1.2 miles from it. Devotion is 0.7 miles from it. Lawrence is 0.5 miles from it. And if there was a Stop and Shop school, it would have been 3 blocks from it. So there is a cluster of schools, and there is busing. You don't see it because the busing happens into that area. And it is important that schools be distributed into the neighborhoods. Not all kids live around Coolidge Corner. There is one other thing, and that is if you put a school in a very congested area, and by the way, you're talking about green space and preserving green space, you know that if the school had been at the Stop and Shop area, there would have been no green space. There would have been playing on the roof. And they would have been taking turns getting to play on the roof. And what happens if somebody falls off? And what happens if somebody from that neighborhood walks into the school with a gun? Because you cannot segregate that kind of a location from what is happening around it. You can't choose who goes into the Stop and Shop, and you would not be able to choose who goes into the school. So choices are not perfect. And there's one other thing which I studied in order to identify what would be the problems in locating a school in that area. And that is the children's health. Asthma is directly related to the exhaust from trucks, diesel trucks. And you are looking at, again, it's not the best of all possible worlds. Everything requires a compromise. But you are looking at a school in a green place, and you're comparing it to a school that would have been in the middle of a shopping zone next to a Stop and Shop with children playing on the roof, if they could play. The EPA states that when selecting a school location, it is important to identify and balance environmental risks and benefits. The EPA recommends that local education agencies seek to avoid locations that have on-site contamination or close proximity to those kinds of polluted zones. Had it been in that Coolidge Corner area, there would have been remediation, because before there was a Stop and Shop, there was a factory there, and there's a gas station right next to there. So nothing is perfect. Just think that this is so much better than what the alternatives are.
Thank you, Rachel. Did we skip Arthur Brownstein? And then if Michelle Marcy, Bob Grinberg, and Richard Nangla could be ready to speak.
One of the things that happens when you're near the end is that it's very difficult to be original. So if you're expecting that, you should probably leave. I beg your pardon? How close can you get?
We're nowhere near the end. There's about 20 more people to speak.
I guess what I'm broadcasting is that I'm not going to be original, but maybe I'll bring an original perspective. Can everybody hear me? Great. So we've heard a lot from people tonight, many different points of views, and I think one of the things that I think about is how can we walk out of here with confidence that a good decision has been made, something that we don't need to regret. And I look at a couple of things, because this is an imperfect decision, there's some art that's involved. But one of the things that we look at is the process that was followed. Was a solid process followed, both from a statutory perspective and from an ethical perspective? And I think anybody who looks at this and looks at the number of meetings we've had, the 20 meetings that we've had, would say, yeah, we've gone above and beyond, or the selectmen and the school committee have gone above and beyond in ensuring transparency and openness and communication with everybody in the town. It's irreproachable, and nobody can complain about that. Solid process that's led us to this conclusion. Second question is, was a good decision made, right? Sometimes you can have good processes but lousy decisions. And I guess I would offer the following test. We had a first-rate professional architectural firm do a study. Take the study, remove the names of the schools, and figure out which school you end up with, which one you would select. And I would argue that if you do this objectively, without bias for your neighborhood, you're going to end up with Baldwin School. I can't assure you of that, but I suspect that's going to be the case. That's certainly the conclusion that I come to. Now, we're dealing with a problem of objections. People do object to this choice. It's understandable. But objections don't nullify the process, and they don't nullify the legitimacy and the integrity of the decision that was made, which is a sound one and a solid one, and which you should move on with. So what I'd like to do is encourage and urge the selectmen, thank them, first of all, for their work in this, for the transparency and the openness, and urge them to implement the decision that's been made in the best interest of the town. Thank you.
Could we have Michelle? Thank you. And then Bob.
Hi, I'm Michelle Morrissey. I live at 363 South Street. And I'm here to say a couple things. I think there are a lot of exciting possibilities for the school, from building collaboration into the architecture, as you were talking about. to building a green building, improving the park around it. But I really want to say that I think that this project is critical beyond the 600 to 800 kids who are going to be lucky enough to go to the school. It's a critical project for the entire town and for the entire community. The children of this town really need this school, and frankly, they needed it 5 years ago. You cannot have a child in the Brookline Public Schools right now without being profoundly aware of the overcrowding that is taking place. My first grader had a mid-morning lunch last year. She continues to this year. As an educator, I can tell you myself from personal experiences, I've had class sizes of 6, I've had class sizes of 30. Class size matters for the education that kids get. So, very glad to be here tonight. This is profoundly important for this town and for the people who live in this town, that this school be built and be built quickly. So, thank you very much. We're glad to be here. Please make it a green building. To talk a little bit about what the school should actually be, I think that this is a community that would support that pretty deeply. But at the end of the day, we are here because we are happy to have the school moving forward.
It's Bob here, Bob Grimberg. Okay. We can move on then with Richard Nangle. I think I see the name Siski Humpling. Siska Humphrey. And then Judean.
My name is Richard Nangle. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 15. For those of you who are reading the point-counterpoint that appeared in the Globe, there was an online poll, yes, 9, no, 550. Thank you. It's not a democratic process when people in our neighborhood don't receive a notification until August 29, and the Baker and Stop and Shop opponents have a 6-month head start in opposing those sites. It's also not a fair process when the deciding vote is cast by somebody who says, I don't care about traffic. I think we all care about traffic, and especially those of us on town meeting. Town meeting has the right and the obligation to nullify this decision. That's why we exist. Bonding will take a 2/3 vote. That's a high threshold, and it's a high threshold for a reason. I want to read to you what the traffic report actually said. Baker School. Beverly Road accommodates 288 two-way morning peak hour vehicles and 164 two-way evening peak hour vehicles. Overall, it is our opinion that the existing traffic congestion can be resolved with adequate on-site parking and queue areas. Overall rating, advantageous. Existing traffic conditions are mitigated by off-street parking and newly created drop-off areas. Now, get this. Hammond Street, in this area, Baldwin School, is very busy with 1,004 vehicles during the weekday morning peak hour and 1,175 vehicles during the weekday evening peak hour. Overall rating, very disadvantageous. This site layout is not workable from a traffic perspective. Baldwin expanded option, access from Sewell. Overall rating, with Woodland Road access, disadvantageous. This site is not recommended due to existing Hammond Street and Heath Street congestion and queues. We are not against building a 9th school. We are against building a school where it doesn't belong. Let's stop this process in its tracks, pivot, put the school at Baker where it belongs.
My name is Sitka Humphrey, and I live in Precinct 6, just up the road here. As Harry Boers mentioned, the only good thing, of course, about living near a school is that the traffic is predictable in terms of the time and also of the time of the year. Having said that, the most contentious part that our precinct dealt with during the renovations of the high school 20 years ago were also all of the traffic issues that we had to deal with. I believe that we had many, many questions for the traffic studies that were done through the town. It has all worked out, and we are living with it still. Do we like having all the traffic? No, but I know that when it's 8 o'clock, it's done. So having said that, I loved being a teacher at the Baldwin when I was hired in 1882. It was a lovely, lovely, and is still a lovely school. 1982. Long time ago. I was told at the time when I was hired that it was built by one of the families or several families in the neighborhood who did not want their young children to cross Route 9 to go to the Heath School. And instead of making a big stink, what they did apparently was build this very lovely school in the 30s. And it is still serving a wonderful purpose, and I hope will continue to do so once the feasibility study and once the feasibility process is done. Having said that, I just went to visit my grandson's new school, which was the school where my husband also went to. He just moved. And as a teacher in this town, I have retired. I was absolutely amazed, and it took me a while to figure out why I was so enthralled with this school that my grandson is going to, which used to be a 4-room schoolhouse in my husband's time. And it was mainly that in the hallways, it was actually used for children to walk through. The art room was really used as an art room. The music room was really used as a music room. They didn't have to share it. The gym was, in fact, a gym. The nurse had an office. The speech and language pathologist had an office. The classrooms were classrooms. They didn't have any little small groups tucked in there of staff that didn't know what to do and where to be. So I cannot wait for us to go and start on the 9th school. We will need more after that. I know it because the buildings keep on being built, and what used to be a family of 2 children is now a family of 3 and moving to a family of 4. So lots of kids coming down the pike, and we have to be ready for them.
We're looking for Judean Patton Clark. And then Sally Herbert and David Clark.
Hi, it's Judine, actually. I'm a parent and a teacher. I have 3 kids at Baker. They get driven most days. I don't know if you guys realize, but it is a reality that a lot of parents have to drive their kids to school because they have to go to work or they live more than the mile away. So it happens. Not every school is 100% walkability. No school is 100% walkable. I just wanted to make that point. And I also wanted to respond to somebody who spoke earlier and ask, why Baker and not the golf course if you're going to advocate for something? I want to emphasize the need for a 9th school now. I feel like we don't have time to waste. There's no sense in going backwards. It means that the school won't get built in time. The pedagogical implications of increased class size hit home for me as a teacher especially. I'm formerly a BPS, Boston Public School teacher, and currently teach in an independent school. And the difference is huge in terms of what class size means we're able to do and able to accomplish. This is an opportunity to be deliberate and thoughtful about the design. We can improve the traffic situation, make what's untenable actually function. Why not take this as an opportunity to fix things? Yeah, that's it. Thank you for all your hard work.
Is Sally here? And then David Clark and Julie Schreiner Dickinson.
I'm Sally Hurlbut, and I live at Hammond Street, right across the way. And I don't think there's a more dangerous place. We come out of Heath Street onto Hammond Street. Hammond Street, and I see it every morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, the traffic is all the way up to Beaver's entrance. And there is no way to get rid of all the traffic on Route 9. And how are you going to put in other streets? And for 800 students who can't drive, but their parents can bring them 800 cars. It's absolutely impossible. It's an area that is very dangerous. You could never do anything with it. And I think that whoever said the Baker School had a wonderful area up there. They did do some work with the Heath School and so on. And I understand that, but you've got to think of the people who live here. And if you build a big building down where you have just put in $1 million something plus those buildings, you can't leave them in the darkness 24 hours a day. So I think we've got to think of another way to go.
Good evening. First of all, I just want to thank you all for the time and energy and effort you put out, and also to thank everybody here. One thing we share in common, whether we agree or not, is that people are passionate, and you've made an effort to come out on a Monday night and voice your opinion and be a part of this process. So thank you to everybody who's here. My name is David, and I first moved to Brookline in 1972 when I was born. And I was raised in the Brookline Public Schools and performed on this stage. Thank you very much. I'm back. And I wanted to make a couple points. And one is that there are no perfect solutions. When I grew up, I went to Baker, and there were 2 sections of each classroom, and I bring my 3 children there now, and it's insane. There are 5 sections, and there is no space, and they have built modulars. And those of you who are saying build it at Baker, come hang out with us at Baker and go through a day and walk with us and see that it's not just whining and moaning. It's actually a really hard place to build on top of if we're going to supply an excellent place for education. The second thing I want to point out is that traffic is terrible everywhere. And in my life, I'm one of the people who's able to say, I remember when. And it's dangerous. Right around where we live, I live in South Brookline, near the BFW Road and the West Roxbury Parkway, and it's not what it was. And so there is no pipe dream in this, and the final point I want to make is that we are not building this for us. I'll say that again. We are not building this for us. We're building this for people who are following us, and we're building this for the kids who are going to begin school in a few years from now. And so what it looks like to us may not be what it is in the future, and I'm living proof of that, being a resident for 43 years. Thank you.
So we have Julie, then Rita McNally, and then Michael Harrington.
Hi, I'm Julie Schreiner Oldham. I am a Baker parent. I have 2 kids who are at Baker School now, and I also have a 2-year-old. And so as we talk about plans for a new elementary school, it's very real to me personally, because I can see what it's like to have a child in the school now, and also to see what it will be like, and to want to make sure that we have enough space for our kids. And I say that as if there was enough space for our kids now. The classes, as you've heard from a number of other parents across Brookline, at Baker, and all of the schools, the classes are extremely overcrowded. My daughter has lunch at 10:30 in the morning, and my other daughter at Baker School has lunch at the very last session, where she goes to lunch, then she has recess, and she comes home. And so you get both ends of it, because there's just not enough space. At Baker School, we have wonderful school events, and there's not enough space for one grade and their families to come to the event at school. It's just, we put on events that we want to include the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, and so they could all participate in a speaker that's coming to the school. There's not space at the school to do that. And we need a school, and we need a school in South Brookline. We talk about busing. There are kids here. There are lots of kids here. There are lots of kids that would be going to this school. I, for one, walk my children to school and love being able to walk my kids to school, but we need a school, and I and many other parents are willing to drive our kids to school. We're willing to walk further to get our kids to school, to ride them on bikes, and to make it work so that we have the space for the kids to have the space that we need, because the overcrowding is the biggest issue that we need to be solving, and it's an important and very timely one. And I just want to say, there are a lot of parents who also support the school who are not able to come to meetings they're just not able to come to meetings, but they're at home watching. As we've been sitting here, we've received pictures of people whose kids have fallen asleep watching this with them. And I think it's a very important part of their town community process. It's been very open. We've had many open meetings that lots of parents and lots of community members have attended, and we really appreciate all of the time that's gone into this to listen to our endless concerns that you do here. And so, I was one who supported the first override and who helped campaign for it, and will be willing to do so again for the next override, and if you need another one after that, to make sure that we keep building these schools, because that's what the kids are moving here to come.
Thank you, Julie. Michael Harrington. Oh, Rita first. I'm sorry, Michael.
Me first. Okay,
yes.
good.
Rita first. Then Tommy Vitolo and Marcy Sachs.
I'm before Tommy Vitolo. My name's Rita McNally. I'm from Precinct 2. I've heard it mentioned several times tonight. Let me tell you about traffic, you people that are concerned about it on Route 9. We have tremendous traffic. I live now off of St. Paul and Brown Street area. We don't have a traffic light there, but it wouldn't matter. Nobody pays attention to it anyway. So they just keep coming on and on. It's like a highway. Every spot in Brookline has some issue with parking or traffic. So you have to learn, if you folks can work together. I heard wonderful comments from some of the parents that spoke about the issues they felt and some of the things that they thought should be looked into. And I think work together, especially with those traffic guys you're both hiring. I never believe any of them. So you got to watch those guys. You got to take photographs in the morning about where the parking's coming. You got to take photographs when they're not watching you taking photographs, so you can ask some questions. What about this? What about traffic? And you'll be fine. My kids, I had 4 children, and they went through the Lawrence School. Half of their elementary school education was in trailers. They look like trailers. I was so concerned about it for all of them. They loved it. They thought it was like a playhouse, and they weren't really going to school. They were just there, and they were really learning. They turned out to be wonderfully more than normal, better than normal people. So I wouldn't worry about the kids. I don't like the idea of children in our community, our greater community, having to eat lunch at 10:30 in the morning. You can't have that going on. It's brutal to them with those memories of school, and not to have a library that's open. Think through it. And I just am going to beg you to think more kindly on the Baker parents. They already have looming in their schedule of things the Hancock Village fiasco. So they're waiting to see if they're going to be inundated with yet 300 more families coming in. They've got that to worry about. There's nothing ideal, but because of what I've heard of you folks speaking, you'll make it ideal, because you'll have a clue about what's going to go on for your kids, what you want. So just work openly. I think that the school committee and selectmen, my friend Nancy, you guys have been pounded and almost overwhelmed, but you stick to it. I loved my last comment. I loved what the architect said. He talked about building. He thought of the light coming into a school. And when you stop and think about what it's like when you live in your home, or if you go into a school and you see the light pouring in, that's so important. So he got me on that one. And then the oak trees, that he understands the importance of them. So I think work together and, stop being so angry and hissing and all of that. That's not going to work. But good luck to you, and I'll be coming to your meetings, listening to Michael talk to us about some of the issues his committee is looking at, and just work together, and it'll turn out all right. Your kids will be fine.
Hi, my name is Mike Harrington. I'm a Baker School parent, and actually it was my kids who fell asleep in front of the TV watching this. So, hi, if you wake back up. I just wanted to commend the school committee and the selectmen on the process, because it has been a long time, a lot of public hearings and comments. And at the end of the day, they had to come to a really difficult decision, not one that I would then be having to make. And some of what I'm hearing now is sort of trying to, I feel trying to relitigate a decision that was made a few months ago, and it was a very difficult decision. It was destined to make a segment of the population unhappy. But I feel at this point we need for the kids to move forward, to get something in place soon, but in a methodical, thoughtful manner. I'm very excited looking at the plans that we saw tonight, the use of the light, the use of green space. I think that's going to be terrific. I think the kids who end up there are going to be very lucky children. I think that people whose kids are going to be able to go there are going to be very happy with the results. One of the things we hear a lot, and it went through the whole process, was how are things now? Traffic is bad, walkability isn't available, environmental issues. One of the things that was pointed out numerous times during the site selection was that we don't put up a school that often. It happens once every 50 years or so. So the situation is going to change in the next 50 years. We don't know what the demographics are going to look like. We don't know where people are going to be. I think that we're going to have to work through these issues, but there are going to be other issues that come up, and some of the issues that we think are important now aren't going to matter 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So I think what would be great to see now is for the Brookline community to come together as it can, take everyone's concerns, try to address them as best they can, but make a terrific school, because I think, as during the previous meetings it was said, this is going to be a terrific school, and let's all come together and try to make it as good as we can. Thank you.
Tommy first.
Tommy Vitolo, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. Welcome to Precinct 6. I wish the Board of Selectmen had joined the school committee in preferring the Stop and Shop site. I recognize that all three finalists have pluses and minuses, but on the whole, I think the Stop and Shop site is best. Baldwin's construction will almost certainly redistrict my children from Pierce to Runkle. Both schools are great, but Pierce is 2/3 of a mile away along well-shoveled Washington Street. Runkle is 1.1 miles away over Aspinwall Hill, a longer trek for my zero-car household, with more crossings and less snow removal. And not to the school they've been attending for years. And yet, and with the understanding that I have friends and colleagues in this room with differing opinions, I support citing the 9th school at Baldwin. Perhaps my South Brookline friends will argue for a 3-section Baldwin and a 3-section Stop and Shop school 10 years from now, after the high school expansion. And I'd join them if they did. I believe we've studied the options. I believe it's time to fine-tune the Baldwin plan with the help of neighbors. And I believe it's time to start building a perhaps net zero school soon. Thank you.
Okay. Marcy Sachs. And if
Hi.
we could have Mindy McCauley and David Silbermerk, and then Jared Lazick.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the civility tonight that I've seen, and for all the work that you've done. I am Marcy Sachs. I have 3 daughters, 6, 8, and 10 at the Baker School, and we also attended preschool at the Sewell site. And I just want to say that I've always felt that was a beautiful gem of a piece of land for learning. I continue to send my kids there. They last week went to the Environmental Center for early release days, and I've always felt like more children should experience that piece of land. And I know, first of all, after seeing the designs and the thoughtful architecture and light study. I live across the street from Baker, but sign me up. I would send my kids to that school rather than have my kids eating lunch at 10:30 in the morning and being in a modular classroom. I do wait in the morning for the buses and everything to clear out before I back out. And yeah, there's a 20-minute window of chaos, but I work with it. Was it an issue when I was living at Baker and going to the school? Yeah, of course. But you know what? As parents, we do what's best for our kids' education. And I biked there. Parents are creative. You'd be very surprised what could happen. I do believe there should be improvements to the sidewalks, but all of the traffic around the Rotary, it was actually safer to ride my bike. I put 2 children in a double bike trailer, and you'd be surprised what parents would do. I've seen how to study the traffic around there. I've seen in the summertime that Beaver Camp is there. So at 4 o'clock, they have a cop, and it's slower, and yes, I'm gonna get to Wegmans 10 minutes later, but you know what, for my children's sake, for the sake of having safe class sizes, for having a cafeteria that everyone can fit in and eat at lunchtime, I think it's worth seeing beyond the traffic stress. And I get it, traffic is here to stay, Route 9 is expanding, but it's a window, and we can study it, we can make improvements, and we can adapt. And I would just like everyone to leave with one message of song tonight, which would be from the Beatles, and it's, please come together right now for Baldwin. Thank you.
Mindy. And then David and Gerard.
Hi, my name's Mindy McCauley, and I live on the corner of Hammond and Heath. And I think that if you don't live in the neighborhood, or I don't think anybody on the committee lives in our neighborhood, could make any judgment about what this area is like and how unsafe it is. I live right on Hammond and the corner of Heath, and I live it every day. You're not going to be riding your bicycles. Your kids are not going to be safe. And there's one other thing as far as traffic that has not been brought up, and that is the gas leak that is on Hammond and Heath that causes National Grid to be there at least a half a year out of the year, and everybody has to agree that National Grid tears up that street. There's a gas leak that's not going away. The pipes are hundreds of years old, and it's going to add to the traffic, and that needs to be taken into consideration during these traffic evaluations. I'd say 6 months out of the year, half of a lane is cordoned off with National Grid trucks digging up the streets. So, good luck. I agree there needs to be another school. This is not the spot for it. I know it's one little area that's green. There's other places to go. Somebody brought up where else you can look. I was in the Heath School last week. Why don't we have, there's tons of space in that school that's underutilized. I walked in, I couldn't believe the space. Why not get a space planner into your schools that can organize your space better? There was huge amount of wasted space in there. I think there's other options, and this is not a good one.
So my points, I'll be brief, are similar because I live right there as well, on right on Heath Street and Woodland. And I will tell you that there is always National Grid out there, and they have told us, because we smell gas routinely, even between when they fix it, and they just say we can't fix it. We just patch it, and we have to sit here for 24 hours like we're looking like we're doing something. And then we go away, and then we'll come back the next time you call. And you can smell gas wafting in our backyard there. And so that's a striking thing and a health-related issue. I'm a physician, and anyone would say that. The second is not just the traffic, and it's not just a 20-minute window. It's the nature and the reason behind the traffic at that convergence zone. The proposed site is just a few hundred feet, in fact, from Route 9 with all of its pollution. And it's the convergence point for everyone coming from the western suburbs. And Heath Street, in fact, is the cut-through. That's what I live. So it's 2 hours every morning and every evening. It's not the 20 minutes. That'll be on top of it. And the speed at which people cut through who are coming from Weston or Wellesley, God knows where, and then down Hammond from West Rocks and Dedham and everywhere else is dangerous. My neighbor who had to leave asked me to say that she can't even turn in to her house next to us because there's so many cars coming second after second, every second, that she can't make the turn across that lane into her own driveway on Heath and Woodland. And the other side of Woodland is Beaver Country Day School, where it's a very dangerous traffic intersection where there should be a light, and they have a police person there, and it's quite congested as well. So I just think that if there is the possibility to really look at the traffic data and to see what that shows, that would be exceedingly important, as well as the gas leaks. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is Gerard here? Gerard Lozar. Then we'll move on to Frank Lloyd, and then Lisa Golden and Jeff Spiegel. Frank Lloyd. Lisa? Please. And Jeff Spiegel.
Hi, I don't remember the name of the man who just spoke, the physician, but I was not sure if I should speak or not. And then when he was saying the things that he was about the speed and everything, I couldn't not come and speak about that. I get emotional about it because my entire life has changed in the last 2 years because I was in an accident by a kid, a teenager, speeding at 2:30 in the afternoon after on Hammond Street, near Woodland Road, and I went into the tree, and I have about 15 screws and plates in my foot. My heel was crushed. Thank God I'm alive. But my entire life has been affected because of speeding on Hammond Street in this neighborhood. And that was without a school there, without a million parents rushing to get their kids and pick them up to take them to their after-school activities. I can't even conceive of how this school being in this location will impact the traffic. Like he said, coming from all directions, all the suburbs, everyone coming for different reasons, but specifically to pick up their kids at these schools at that time. And this kid rushing to his after-school program, he wasn't even from this area. So he was rushing to an after-school practice. He says, I'm going to be late for practice. He stood there like this, and he couldn't even look at me in the eyes as I was in my crushed-up car, and the emergency vehicles had to come and extract me. So I just wanted to speak about that because I am a living example of how the traffic is terrible, and there wasn't even a lot of traffic at 2:30 in the afternoon in that moment, at that very moment. So when there is a lot of traffic, I can't even imagine, and all the parents rushing, trying to get there first to pick up their kids in the line. I don't know, it's going to be, I just envision this being a disaster. So I just wanted to speak up.
Have Dwight Angelini after you.
Hi, thank you. Let's assume that everybody here wants the best for the kids of Brookline. I know I do. And let's assume that the select members of the board here are doing their best. And let's assume that they're trying to do their best with a series of imperfect locations. Okay? There's a lot of things that were suggested as to why Baldwin was not a good site. There are other things that people have suggested as to why Baker is not a good site. As someone said, we're not really here to relitigate that process. There was a process, and we're in the feasibility stage, and it's important to now determine if this is a good site. I sat through the opening remarks here today, and I was astounded at the data that suggests that we're going to have over 2,300 children without a site to put in school. And yet, we want to devote a bond, increased taxpayer revenue, redistricting, busing, etc., for a school that can fit 600 people, 800 people, it's a drop in the bucket. Why are we doing this? If you really want to make a legacy and do something that the founders of Brookline, as were brought up to us 400 years ago, would be proud of, let's do something that will increase the green space in the town, create a school site that will allow some future proofing, allow us to grow. Now, great, you're thinking, well, there is no such a site. Well, there is a site. Since the decision was made for the Baldwin site, a 14-acre parcel of land in the same neighborhood has come available. 14 acres, gardened, behind a gate, abutting no one. Perfect location. 14 acres. It's 5 or 6 times the site of this postage stamp location you're trying to squeeze a Walmart into. And it will be something that will make our town remarkable. Let's do the right thing. It is affordable. We can give a tax incentive to the owner. We are converting a billionaire's private property into a resource for the entire town. You know what? The best argument I've heard for Baldwin tonight is nonsense. The best argument is we're making good time. We're moving forward. But if we're moving forward in the wrong direction, what's the point? I don't want to have my property taxes go up for something that needs another school next. And all the Baker School people here, you're next. Okay? Your site came in second, whatever. I don't really care about the site. It's not a not in my backyard thing. You want to do something historic and right, do it right. Somebody earlier tonight mentioned the golf course site and the garbage truck site. That's another great idea, okay? The golf course, the public golf course has lots of opportunities, but again, there is this new site. New data comes up, and smart people change course. I'm asking all of you to really make a legacy for Brookline and do the right thing.
Okay, is Dwight Angelini. Okay, then Pam Roberts and Scott Gillespie. Pam? And then Scott.
Pam Roberts. I've been a devotion parent since 1998, with my third child finally almost done in a year and a half. It's been a while. I've been serving on the Devotion Renovation Committee, which has been a fascinating process, an eye-opener, and a wonderful look at the way the town works together. Devotion, the community graciously agreed to become an 1,100 plus student site, 5 classes per grade. That's a lot of kids, but we needed it. They were crammed in. We were using closets for classrooms, and the building was really pretty decrepit. Neighbors were very upset with our plans. A bigger building, there's a lot of fear involved with a bigger building, traffic, what's going to happen? And it's been an ongoing conversation. And I encourage those of you who live in the neighborhood and from other parts of town to keep the conversation going. Traffic wasn't solved in a week, and it wasn't solved in 6 months. We had a lot of series of conversations, and we're feeling pretty good about the traffic now. It's true, a lot of parents aren't walking their kids anymore. I'd like to, when my eldest started in 1998, I would say 90% of the school was walk to school. A lot of parents drive. The demographics have changed. You have a lot of 2-income parents who work outside of the city, and they swoop in, and we're accommodating that. It wasn't my first choice, but we're accommodating because we're trying to make the traffic smooth in very busy Coolidge Corner. And the neighbors are actually starting to feel excited about what's coming. They've seen the plans. As long as it doesn't get budgeted out, we've found a patina for parts of the sides of the exterior that are going to match the beautiful cupola. It's going to be lovely. We're expanding our outdoor learning gardens that were started a few years ago, and the neighbors can come explore that. We're gathering rainwater off the roof to help water that. The fields are going to be permanent, usable all the time. Devotion fields right now are such, well, right now they're all fenced in, but they have been such that we had those lovely Brookline, you can't use the fields today signs more than half the time. And these are fields that are used more on weekends and after school hours by college students, high school students, families in the neighborhood who don't go to devotion. And it's thrilling to think that it's going to be a community area now. So I'm just asking people to have an open mind. I really think it's going to be wonderful. Traffic was a concern, and we have talked a lot about it. We've worked with experts, and I think that going forward you can give your input. I just want to close with this. I don't mean to be a downer, but a very wise minister told me years ago that any institution, a temple, a church, a school, a town, is always one generation away from extinction. And I know that sounds a little dramatic, but if you don't take care of the children, if you don't teach them the lessons, if you don't take care of families, no one's going to want to live there. And the kids are going to grow up and they're going to move away, and people aren't going to move in. And that sounds so dire, but it's really what I believe. We take care of our kids in this town. I've seen it over and over again since I've lived here. And I
Thank you
applaud you all. Thank you.
Okay, we have Julie Jett. Oh, Scott is here. Good.
Hi, Scott Gladstone, Precinct 16. Boy, I like a much bigger room. People left. Okay. So I like what this gentleman had to say, because he didn't just say no. So the problem with the process from the folks who have been really upset about the Baldwin site, which, by the way, is only the least bad site, but that's probably the best we can do, is that they said no to everything. I wanted it to be at an unused corner of the golf course near Grove and Newton. There were some challenges to it, and because Article 97, that kind of thing. Those things could have been overcome if we could have all come together and said that was good. But the neighbors kept saying, Precinct 15 neighbors kept saying, no. Traffic and all kinds of other problems. In green space and trees and these kind of things. Now, the acquisition cost for the Reebok house is probably between $15 or $20 million. I don't know, maybe he knows. If that will work within all these numbers, I would be in favor of it, but only if this gentleman can tell me that the neighborhood's not going to say no to the Reebok house. The neighborhood's going to get behind the bond override and everything else we need. Because if that consensus is not together about the traffic that's going to be on Woodland Road and everything else, then that's pie in the sky. So if that's not going to work, if you can't guarantee that he's going to deliver a constituency to support it, then we need to stick with the process that's already created something that is viable. Every car on Hammond Street comes by Baker School first. They either go on Independence or LaGrange. So Baker School already experiences every bit of traffic that's near the Baldwin School. Now, I know that traffic because I work at 1244 Boylston Street. So that's my neighborhood. I walk everywhere. I bank at Century Bank in the corner. I see that traffic. It will get exacerbated for 20 minutes a day. But beyond, then it will clear out. That's what happens at Baker. Richard Nangle says, Baker, it's the obvious choice. Well, and I like walkable schools. And my kid was bussed out of the Baker site 15 years ago because they thought then 650 kids was too many. Now we're at 830. And the problem is that, particularly for South Brookline, there is no walkable school. You will not be able to have 800 kids being able to walk to the Baker School because already the people surrounding the Baker School, it's such a wide band that the outer bands can't walk. That means any additional kids from the neighborhood who have to come to a Baker School aren't going to be able to walk. So any school that's going to be chosen, am I almost done? Any school that's going to be chosen is going to have to be a driving school. And this site has a beautiful park next to it, and the Baker School has an undersized park, which will, if you put 800 more people on it, it's unworkable.
So we have Julie, And then we have two Arthurs, both of whom I can't read their last names, so it doesn't matter which order.
Hi, I'm Julie Jetty. I live at 93 Payson Road, and I also run the risk of being unoriginal. But I wanted to talk about the concerns around busing and traffic, which Scott actually addressed really well just now. But because of the mismatch in town of where students are and the available space, there was going to be significant busing in any plan involved that the school committee and the Board of Selectmen were looking at. There's simply just a mismatch of students and space, and students would either be coming one way through, either coming way south to Baker, or they will be going north from Baker, and so that would be happening in this neighborhood regardless. I'm very concerned about environmental impacts as well with buses, and I know there's several towns around us that are piloting electric buses in their fleet, so I really hope that we're taking a look at that. It would be great to see those implemented here. And in closing, I just want to say that I think this has been an incredibly open process. As I was leaving to come to this meeting tonight, my 7-year-old said to me, "Mommy, not another meeting." And those were all open public meetings, by the way. So thank you to the Board of Selectmen and the school committee for continuing your enormous efforts in this area. And I look forward to continuing to support the building of a fantastic new school that the town and the neighborhood can be proud of. So thank you very much.
Is there an Arthur here? Arthur 1 or Arthur 2? No. Okay, that would leave Jeff Weggs, Mary Litterst, and Paige Roberts. Jeff?
Hello, I'm Jeff Webb. I live at 325 Heath Street, which is about 8 houses away from the Baldwin School. And I will probably make many of my neighbors here unhappy when I say that I was delighted to hear that the Baldwin School was chosen for the 9th elementary school. I would think it would be fantastic to have a school just down the street where my elementary age school kids could walk to. The fact of the matter is, they have no playmates now. There's nobody that we can walk to because, as you may have noticed, most of the people who spoke who are neighbors are senior citizens. So if a new school is built, maybe that will start more younger families moving into the neighborhood so my kids can have people that they can play with that are close. I think our schools are overcrowded. I think that we really, no one here is disputing that we need a night school. The only thing that I was surprised to hear was after all these public meetings and this analysis of all the different locations that we're here today and no one has really done a real traffic study. It's not just like a situation where, traffic is okay and then we're going to build a school and we're so worried there's going to be a problem. But just like my neighbor who was the physician said, who's also on Heath Street, we don't just have like a 20-minute worry. We have a 2-hour window on both parts of the day where Heath Street is a thoroughfare that people come by. And if there's some solution, whether it's another entrance on Woodland, I would be so supportive of having a school down the street. My big concern is just that we get this right. And it may be that the Baldwin School is the best place and that Baker is not a good place. But when I was hearing the people talk tonight, the issue I heard about Baker was, gee, they have 1/5 or 20% of the traffic that we have up at Hammond. That traffic spot, and I have to drive through it frequently, I sit there for like 4 or 5 minutes waiting for the light to turn green. I can just imagine what's going to happen if there isn't something different, like make West Street a one-way. I'm not a civil engineer. I hope that there's a solution, but that's all I have to say.
Mary Litterst. And then it's is it Paige Roberts? I can't read. No, it's getting late.
I signed up and you didn't call me. Can I just go?
What's your name?
Brian Bergstein.
Brian, you're coming up, I think. Well, come on up. Oh, you're at the end. You're at the very end. George Albert White, please. And then Rita. Rita's already spoken. And then John Rottenberg. Yes.
You know, if you do that in class, Hi, I'm George Abbott White, town meeting member from the other side of town, Precinct 9. Like some of the people who have spoken before, I taught school 42 years, so I have a little understanding, I think, of what it means to be crowded, what it means to have traffic, what it means to go through 6 or 7 renovations. But I think what I really want to say, I just want to say, I think 3 things. Number 1, the tensions and difficulties that we're feeling are not just the tensions and difficulties of Brookline. We're in a tough time as a country. I don't have to tell you that. And I think what's gone on tonight is very reassuring to me. There's some sharp differences, but we've been able to lay them out. As a number of people have said, the tone has been strident in some ways, but also civil. And I think we've accomplished quite a bit. There's some interesting options that have come up. The people that have given their time without remuneration have been lauded for it. There's some attentiveness to green issues. In fact, to a number of issues, including the stuff that I did for most of my life, which is working with kids and trying to guarantee that they'll have a good place to be. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is where I live, and just to what's a guy from the other side of town worrying about, quote unquote, this side of town? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's one town. It's one town. And where we are, if you don't know, we're being overwhelmed by other things. All right? As a town meeting member, I walk around. There have been 19 gut and rehabs if I take a 10-minute walk. 19. And those are taking single families and turning them into more kids. 2s, okay? And they're coming in at anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million. So you can imagine who's moving there. Secondly, as you probably know, there's maybe 10 or 12 40Bs under the guise or the camel under the tent of quote-unquote affordable housing. And those are going to be hundreds and hundreds of kids. So, I like the urgency that people have underscored. And I like Mike's numbers. I like the fact that the superintendent has reminded us of numbers. We really need to get moving on this thing. Not a 9th school, but a 10th school. All right? We really got to get out of the box, and a high school. So it's tough in my neighborhood. It's tough in Brookline. It's tough in America. So we've got to get together and stay together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Is John Rottenberg here? And then Paul Harris.
Hi, my name is John Rottenberg. I'm the former state representative of Brookline. I served 2 terms in the early 70s. I used to work for Tip O'Neill. I'm going to give you a little bit of history. Tip O'Neill was the first organization Democrat to be against the war in Vietnam. And someone asked him at one of these hearings, Tip, why are you still in favor of the war in Vietnam? Because all the generals are telling me it's such a good thing to do. We're going to stop communism. Well, guess what? This one kid said to him, don't talk to the generals. Talk to the people who really understand what's happening. So he did. And guess what? He was the first organization Democrat to be against the war in Vietnam. And I'm saying to the school committee and to the select people, listen, there were many good points made. The Baldwin School is not the place to build a new school. I heard 3 good options. Don't feel like, because we're already in this thing, say we're into Baldwin, that we should build at Baldwin if there's a better solution. I love Brookline. Brookline's a great town with wonderful people who work here. But I'm telling you, putting a school on Heath Street, where Baldwin is located now, is wrong. And when these kids get killed, that's going to be your responsibility, not mine. I must tell you, I heard a woman here who said she got run over. I got run over in Hammond Street, Hammond and Heath, 2 summers ago. The traffic is impossible. The select people allowed the zoning to build all these new buildings around us. You know, when I've lived in this house all my life, right next to the Baldwin School. There was one house next to me. Now that one house is 4 houses. There was one house across the street from me. Now it's 2 houses. Now where McNeely's place was, now you get all these apartment buildings. It's not just the residents who live in Heath Street who care about this. It should be the select people. Why are you allowing all this rampant building when you recognize that something has to give? And I feel so sorry for the poor students of Brookline that they have to be forced in living in such a horrible condition in the way that these schools are set right now. It's your responsibility. You should be doing things that could work. And let me say this. Education is changing dramatically. And we have to think about the future. And putting it at Baldwin is not the best location. Looking at these other sites may make some sense. I mean, and I know my time is up, but I want to thank the town of Brookline for letting this opportunity for the citizens of Brookline to speak their will.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Could we hear from Paul Harris and Brian Bergstein? And then Sarah Griffin will be our last speaker this evening.
Hi, I'm Paul Harris. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I've lived here for 40 years, and I have 2 sons who went through the Brookline schools, K through 12. And I want to highlight what an unusual time this is in Brookline's history. So far, I have not been able to come up with a single person who can remember when Brookline went from 7 K to 8 schools to 8 K to 8 schools. I don't know when that happened, but I'm looking for that answer. But right now, not only are we planning for a 9th school, but there's talk about a possible 10th school, major enrollment increases in the high school that have to be addressed. And so I want to thank all of the selectmen and all of the school committee people and all the other people in the town. So many people. This has already been a long process. I know it's going to continue to be a long process. And I want to thank all of the people here who really have been making a great effort to do this openly, to have citizen involvement. And I believe that the best decision at this point is to go ahead with the Baldwin School, and then to somebody's got to start thinking about where the 10th school might go. And for the community in the neighborhood, I really want to encourage everybody there, and I think it has been civil discourse, but I want to encourage people to really try to make something work there, to make that not only a great school, but also a great community center that the whole neighborhood can use, the facilities on the evenings and on the weekends, and that can be a great part of Brookline that people will be attracted to. And I understand that traffic's very difficult, and I do think that that's probably the most critical issue that has to be resolved, and it's not going to be easy. But as many other people have said, if you look at all of the other sites that were considered, they all have big issues as well. So I think the best thing to do at this point is to go forward and to put a lot of resources, get community involvement, get involvement of the town, and really find the best possible solution to the traffic issue. Thanks.
Thanks. My name is Brian Bergstein. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 6. I have 2 kids at the Pierce School, and very much feel the effects of the overcrowding. I know every time we have one of these meetings, there's a presentation of sort of how bad it could get. I know very viscerally that it's bad now. A lot of talk came up tonight about the 10:30 lunches. I don't think my children would mind having lunch at 10:30 if they could actually have a full lunch. My daughter has 15 minutes for lunch and 15 minutes for recess. So it's a reminder that we are living in a, what should we say, suboptimal situation. There are problems in the Brookline schools that need solutions. And in the spirit of this being a feasibility study, I would just urge all the people who have already put so much time into this, and the school committee, the superintendent, Board of Selectmen, that if the Baldwin School does look feasible from the work you're going to do in this feasibility study, that you go for it. It's apparent that it has problems, but it's a shame a lot of people have left tonight because I've been listening very carefully to the arguments made by the opponents of the site, and I've been struck really by how unconvincing most of them have been. For example, we've heard someone demonstrably stand up and just lay it on the line, Baker is the place. Let's pivot to Baker. As if Baker had been chosen, there would have been no opposition to Baker. Every spot, as you know, probably better than anybody in the room, has problems. Now, if it's not feasible, that's a different story. But if it's feasible and yet not ideal, I think you got to go ahead. Someone else was talking about how, wait a minute, why are we doing this? This is just a drop in the bucket. We need 2,300 seats for students, and this is only 800. Well, all the more reason why we do this. Not spend another year or two making our kids have 15-minute lunches, and get going, as some other speakers have wisely said, on a 10th school and moving forward. We have got to move forward. This process has been dragging on. Rather than it being some sort of like shady, quick deal, this has been going on for a very long time. And just because some people in the neighborhood may not have heard about it in the past few years does not mean that there hasn't been a lot of deliberation and a lot of attention paid to this. So again, I just want to reiterate, I know problems will come up in the feasibility study, but I hope that we can, those opponents who are still here, I hope that you can bring your knowledge of the neighborhood and all its nuances to the process to improve the neighborhood. I can't imagine that there's no way, if a school is going to be built there, I can't imagine that there's no way to get out of this some improvement to the traffic problems you're already experiencing. Engage with the process and use this to make your neighborhood, solve problems in your neighborhood that you already want to solve. Let's move together quickly. Thank you.
And finally, Sarah Griffin, if she's still here. Sarah.
Actually, I just arrived.
Oh, so fair.
Sorry, I was on a plane, I'm Sarah Griffin. I live at 38 Clearwater Road. I have 2 children at the Baker, one in 3rd and one in 4th grade, so I will be very brief. I did not hear many of the comments. I've heard about the last 15. I apologize. I think I just want to be brief in saying, it sounds like many of the comments have been around the goal is education. Yes, traffic is an issue. Yes, thinking about all those other issues, but we are trying to have high-quality education in Brookline. I actually just came from a day with Health and Human Services and the Department of Education, thinking about things like executive skills and thinking about what children need to thrive and what adults need to thrive. And a lot of what they talked about is supportive and nurturing environments between adults and children. Smaller classrooms are what do that. Green space, place to breathe, and places to move. So I want to kind of note that I think we want to keep those principles in mind, obviously, so that Brookline can be the place that we have always wanted it to be. In that sense, I think I am supportive of Baldwin in that it has green space, in that it would not create such a high density at Baker where children might not feel as safe and ready to thrive. And overall, whether it's 9th and maybe 10th expansion of school, because those smaller classrooms are going to make a difference for our children. I completely echo the 15-minute lunch. My children's lunches come back half full because they do not have time to eat. And so really thinking about moving the process, I really applaud what you just said, moving the process so that our children have the opportunity to learn in the ways that we know Brookline prides ourselves in, and providing the kinds of relationships. And I think Baldwin is one of the best places for that, and I thank you for the time to consider this entire process again, and know that you'll make a good decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm Blair Hines, resident at 745 Heath Street, and I'm a member of the building committee. And I have mixed feelings about this site. And on one level, I look at it and I think it's a great site for a school. Terrific. My major concern is the traffic and the gridlock that happens on Route 9 and on Hammond Street and Heath Street. The main reason I'm on this committee working with it is I want to be convinced by our traffic engineer that in fact the traffic for the school is feasible. So I hope to that end that the traffic engineer is not given a task to tell us just how you could manage something in here, but that if the results of the study is that you can't really bring 800 kids with parents and buses here, that's an option on the table. I do want to have another school. I think it's needed, and this may in fact be the right site for it. I don't know. I just want us to, as Jonathan said earlier in the meeting, let's follow the facts. So I hope that the traffic engineer is allowed to advise us that way. Thank you.
I'm just going to speak for a couple minutes on the public process and community engagement. My name is Ben Lummis. I work for the superintendent on the superintendent's leadership team. And just to highlight a few things about going forward in public process. As you see here, one of the main charges of the building committee is to manage engage the public and inform the public on the project. We're doing that. We're thinking of three ways we're thinking about as we do this: inform folks, make sure people are aware of the information. So we're doing that through our public websites, include folks in the process, both in public comment, but also through design alternatives, that sort of thing, and then also engage people. So really work together with people, whether that's PTOs, school faculty, neighborhood community members, parents, that sort of stuff, and we'll continue to do that as we go along here. We are getting the word out using these various methods. I won't read them, but you can see them all, including district town websites, social media, email lists. There was green sheets in the back. Make sure you sign up for that list, and then you'll get all the notices for the upcoming meetings. We also use more traditional methods, including newspapers and the occasional mailing. We've done a couple of mailings so far. We avoid those when possible just because of the cost, but we'll continue to do those with the neighborhood and community members around Baldwin School. And then this is the information you'll see on the town websites. Both you can go to the town website or the school's website. They'll all link back to the school's website where all the comprehensive information is, including presentations like for tonight, notices, summaries of these meetings, etc. But it's all there, and you can find it quite easily. There are also links on the home pages of both the town and the school websites to get to those detailed web pages. And just in terms of what's upcoming, so essentially, we're meeting the two community meetings we already had, the building meetings, which are on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. So tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock at Town Hall, 8 a.m. that is, and every second and fourth Tuesday mornings, the building committee will meet, and those are all public meetings. We'll also have other meetings.
You should just explain that people are welcome to come. They're not open for.
Right. There is a public comment of those meetings, but you're welcome to attend and observe and listen, and also get materials that are handed out there typically.
Also, those two every other week dates have been set aside for the committee. It's not guaranteed it will always meet on those dates, so go to the Brookline calendar online before you truck to town hall to attend the meeting. Yep. But tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and hours, the building committee's meeting, and then on the 24th, those are going to happen.
So we'll also be meeting this month and early next month with the Heath, Baker, and Lincoln PTOs to get their input on what the ninth school should be. And as you can see, February, we'll have public meetings, both large and small ones, to get input on the design alternatives that Jonathan Levy and his crew will be creating. And then as we go along, input on the preferred solution. And then in April and May, commission and board meetings that are leading up to a town meeting as well. So it'll be pretty comprehensive. There's a lot more opportunities for folks to engage in both the large and smaller settings, as well as keep informed via the websites and whatnot.
So let me just say that for those of you who really had a great time tonight and want more, in the black box at the high school, 7 o'clock Thursday night, is the kickoff for the Brookline High School expansion project. Really exciting, totally parallel process. Another huge project that we're all engaged in together, equally just as vital for the community. And so 2 nights from now, back to high school. And I think we're done. Any you want to comment?